Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're looking at the incredible and, honestly, sometimes hilarious collateral damage left behind by the absolute biggest chart force in music history. When we talk about legendary music, we almost always focus on the winners, right? But today, we're flipping the script. We are going to look at the chart casualties, the brilliant, timeless songs that were brutally denied the top spot, and on the flip side, the highly improbable giant killers who actually managed to strike back. So, to get us started, I want you to ask yourself, what do Bob Dylan, the Beach Boys, and Gladys Knight all have in common? I mean, we're talking about absolute titans of the music industry here. You might think the answer is, I don't know, a specific award or a shared collaborator. But it's actually way more frustrating than that. They all shared a very specific, almost cursed chart fate, entirely because they just happened to release their absolute masterpieces at the exact wrong moment in history. All right, first up, let's talk about the ultimate pop juggernaut and the sheer scale of Beatlemania. To really understand the fate of these artists, we have to look at the massive, immovable object standing right in their way: 20. The Beatles racked up a staggering 20 Billboard #1 hits in just 6.5 years. From their first American #1 in early 1964 all the way to their last in 1970, they basically built a brick wall on the pop charts. It was virtually impenetrable for anyone else trying to reach the summit. And just to give you an idea of the kind of momentum we're talking about here, their breakthrough single, I Want to Hold Your Hand, sold over 12 million copies worldwide all by itself. 12 million! It literally launched the British invasion, caused absolute pandemonium in record stores, and created this massive tidal wave of sales that crushed almost everything in its path. Which brings us to the actual victims of the Fab Four, the legendary artists who got permanently stuck at #2. Because of this totally unprecedented dominance, there's a very exclusive and probably very frustrated club in music history. Just look at this list. We're talking about incredibly famous acts: Bob Dylan, the Beach Boys, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Blood, Sweat and Tears, The Toys. Any other week, any other year, these artists would have easily coasted right to the #1 spot. But instead, they all had to settle for second place, staring up at a Beatles track that just absolutely would not budge. Let's zoom in on some of these iconic head-to-head chart battles where legendary songs were outright denied first place. Because these weren't just throwaway pop tracks being blocked. They were literal cultural masterpieces. Take a look at this matchup. We've got Bob Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone. This was a revolutionary 6-minute opus that completely changed rock music forever. But in September 1965, it gathered no moss at the top of the charts because it stalled out right at #2. And what was blocking it? The Beatles' smash hit, Help. But you know what's really fascinating? There wasn't really any bitterness. Even the artists getting blocked deeply respected their untouchable talent. Dylan himself later said, their chords were outrageous, and their harmonies made it all valid. He even famously thought they were singing I Get High in I Want to Hold Your Hand, only to find out later they were actually singing I Can't Hide. The respect was just immense, even coming directly from the Casualties. And man, the Casualties just kept on coming. Look at this classic matchup from early 1966. The Beach Boys had released their massive, fun-loving hit, Barbara Ann, which was absolutely flying up the charts. But it meant the exact same fate, slamming right into a brick wall named We Can Work It Out. The crazy part? The Beach Boys were actually Capitol Records label mates with the Beatles, but on the charts, it was strictly a one-way street. But the irony goes deeper. Let's look at what happened when the Beatles got so big they started blocking themselves, and even their closest friends. Talk about the ultimate flex. In April 1964, right during the peak of their initial U.S. invasion, the Beatles occupied the entire top 5 of the Hot 100. They were so incredibly massive, they literally ran out of competitors to block, so they just held themselves at #2. Their iconic remake of Twist and Shout was entirely stuck in the runner-up position for 4 whole weeks, just because their own single, Can't Buy Me Love, refused to drop from #1. And this collateral damage even extended to their own inner circle. In 1966, a band called The Circle released the hit Red Rubber Ball, which was co-written by Paul Simon. Now get this, The Circle was literally named by John Lennon. They were managed by the Beatles' own manager, Brian Epstein. They even opened for the Beatles on tour. And their grand reward for all of this? Being blocked from #1 by the Beatles' paperback writer. No favors on the Billboard charts, right? But wait, this one might actually be the ultimate betrayal. In 1968, newcomer Mary Hopkin released Those Were the Days. This track was released on the Beatles' very own Apple Records label. It was even produced by Paul McCartney himself, but out in the wild, the charts show absolutely no mercy. Hopkins' track was blocked from the top spot by, you guessed it, the biggest Beatles hit of them all, Hey Jude. Okay, let's flip the script. It's time to talk about the unlikely giant killers. So we've seen all the collateral damage, but every once in a while, David actually beats Goliath. It took an absolute legend to break the spell, though. After a staggering 14-week reign at the top of the US charts in 1964, the Beatles were finally dethroned. And it wasn't by another up-and-coming rock band. Nope. It was jazz legend Louis Armstrong with Hello, Dolly, which literally forced the Beatles' Do You Want to Know a Secret down into the runner-up slot. It was the very first time the Beatles really tasted their own medicine. Which brings us to the biggest upset in British chart history, the Humperdinck anomaly. Meet our highly unlikely giant killer. His real name was Jerry Dorsey. He was a tuberculosis survivor who had been grinding away in the clubs, and frankly, nobody in show business wanted to manage the guy. But his new manager had this crazy, kind of brilliant idea: change his name to something totally unforgettable. So he took the name Engelbert Humperdinck. Yes, as in the 19th century German composer who wrote the opera Hansel and Gretel. I mean, you literally can't make this stuff up. Let's walk through the timeline of this unbelievable mini-heist. First, an instrumental country song called Release Me is pitched to Tom Jones, who just flat out rejects it. Humperdinck records it, but the record just sits collecting dust on a shelf for 3 whole months. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, a singer named Dickie Valentine gets ill, which gives Humperdinck this incredibly lucky last-minute slot on live TV at the London Palladium. He goes out, he sings it, and boom, it sells 80,000 copies the very next day. But here's the wild part. It almost didn't happen. During the recording session, the studio choir actually got a severe case of the giggles. Every single time they tried to record, the choir just started laughing. It got so bad that Humperdinck leaned over to his arranger and whispered, "Are you sure this is a good song? Everyone's laughing at it." Little did he know he was standing there about to record a worldwide smash. And that leads us right to this climactic twist. This exact song, recorded by a guy named after a dead 19th century opera composer whose own choir was laughing at him, was the very song that stopped the Beatles from getting their 12th consecutive UK #1. It beat out what many critics consider to be the greatest double A-side ever released, Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever. Just incredible. And this wasn't just some one-week fluke either. Look at this number. 56. Humperdinck's track didn't just beat the Beatles, it parked itself on the charts for a mind-boggling 56 consecutive weeks. It became the biggest selling record of 1967 in the UK. He truly became the ultimate giant killer of the entire Beatlemania era. So that brings us to the end of our explainer, but I want to leave you with a provocative thought here. When we look back today at absolute masterpieces like a Rolling Stone, Penny Lane, or Strawberry Fields Forever, we don't really care that they peaked at #2, do we? So what do you think? Does a chart position actually define a song's legacy in the moment, or does time tell the true story? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll catch you next time.